great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Oh my goodness, being in this place, amazing. That's my first time here, so I'm a little bit in awe of the whole scene. Let's get started. First of all, welcome Dr. Bernice King to Personal and Professional Best. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you, glad to be here.
So our program this month is specifically to invest in folks the idea of faith and or community service, because if someone is traveling without faith, they can still serve in the community. But since we're here at Ebenezer, it feels to me like it's about faith and community service today, a little bit for us. Who specifically do you believe inspired your pops, and maybe what specifically did to go on the mission that he did, which was really a mission about community service, and it was a mission about changing our nation and getting our nation on the road to the best place. And it really changed the world in many ways, and it continues to. But who was the person?
I would say two things. One, obviously his family, because of the service that both my great-grandfather and my grandfather provided in terms of, integration. But a story, an experience that happened to my father when he was 6 years old. At that time, he had a couple of friends, white boys who they didn't live across. Their parents had a store across the street from the home. And he used to play with them every day. And suddenly, there were all these excuses that were being presented, and he was told he could no longer play with them. Well, what was happening is the reality of segregation in the South was about to separate those friends because my father was getting ready to enter school.
Oh my goodness.
And it really pierced him. And he went home and crying, and my grandmother at that time had to sit him on her knee and just explain the history of slavery and segregation. And say to him, you're just as good as anybody. And I think at that point in his heart, he wanted to change the world.
The seed was planted.
The seed was planted. And I kind of explained it this way. Part of the reason that I think he fought so hard for integration is because, and the beloved community really is because he lost a dear friend. And he was trying to find a way to reconcile with that friend because of the conditions that separated him. So I think it defined the rest of his life.
You know, when I hear your story, it's hard to not believe that it is true, that God ordained this before history began, that you would carry the torch, that your dad would do his part, that your grandpops, that everyone in your family would be God's messengers to really advance the truth, which is that we're all made in his likeness, and whatever the color of our skin is, matter not. Those children, when I hear the story, children don't see, because they don't understand at that point anything other than the beauty in another human being, and they just want to have fun and have friends, right? Too bad that sometimes ends when we turn into to young adults. I want to ask you a question. I often talk about forgiveness because it's the thing that changed my life. When I was 7, we had lost a little brother to a childhood illness, and my mom spun out of control. And my dad, who is now reverently known in our family as the source, the night my mom left a note and left us, my dad, the first thing he said to us at dinner that evening was, you need to forgive your mom. And he didn't just say the words. He said the words in a way that I knew that he already had. And then he did everything the rest of his life and still does. He's just an amazing human being. But I learned the greatest lesson in life that day was forgiveness. How do you go about forgiving the people that have hurt the King family?
Well, there are two things that happen. One is just experiential, and the other one is the influence of my mom, my grandfather. We grew up in a family that really not only stressed the importance of unconditional love, even of your enemies, but they lived it, they embodied it. That's why I always encourage parents, don't just teach your kids lessons, live those lessons, because they're gonna learn more and embrace it greater if they see you embody it. And so my mother, my grandfather first, when we experienced all these different tragic deaths, his children would gather the family together, and he said, look, I'm not gonna stoop as low as to hate any person. And when he gathered us together when my grandmother was shot, he said, I forgive the man who took my wife, because he was in the church and saw it and wanted to go for her, but they restrained him to save his life. And he met with the gentleman and said, son, I'm gonna pray for you. And our family literally requested that they not employ the death penalty, because we don't believe in the death penalty. And so having that example, and then my mother, who used to always say to me and my siblings, I don't hold grudges. And I knew of the experiences in her life where people hurt her, betrayed her, and I watched how she still extended goodness and kindness to them in spite of that. So I had that powerful example. But I had to go on my own personal journey, even though the example was there, of processing through my own interpretation of what happened to us through all of these deaths, because I really became very angry. And at one point I hated white people. I'm serious. Nobody knew it.
I understand.
Because the kind of house
it would be natural to do that, by the way. Yeah, sure.
So internally, I that was welling up inside of me, and I had a stronger hate for white men. And so it was an interview that I did, and it wasn't when I was 20. I was carrying this well into my 30s. I did an interview in 2000, so I would have been, 36, 37 at that time, with James Robeson. And he was talking to me about the loss of my father and how it has impacted me. And in the middle of our interview, he just said, can I give you a hug? Now, this is being, pre-taped for television, and there was an audience there. And inside of me, I'm like, heck no. But my mother taught me better, so I went through the motions. It was one of the most genuine hugs that I had ever felt.
Wow.
It was like God intercepted in that moment, intervened, and through him, I started feeling not only release, but relief. And it wasn't something that immediately, but what it did is it started me on a new journey.
Yeah. I found that the greatest way to affect the life of another is by giving them something they don't deserve. Right? And if we can give someone else who's hurt us something they don't deserve, which is
that's what God
Jesus
did for us.
That's what he did for us,
what he
right?
did for
And
us
so
when
if
he
we
sent
model
Jesus.
that, they know they don't deserve it. They know they don't deserve our love and forgiveness after they've hurt us. And my God, you all have been hurt.
Yeah.
We all have, but not like the King family. And I just thank God James hugged you, because when he did, he started the process.
He did.
It's a great reminder to all of us.
And it may sound trite to people.
No, I think it's powerful stuff.
Because people hug you from time to time, but God meets us. That's why we have to always have our vessels available.
Well, I think
you never know when God's gonna meet you.
That's right.
Use you to meet somebody in the middle of their pain or their journey into something greater.
We live in the world, we're getting out of COVID or getting in the final chapter, it feels like anyway, hopefully. And our audience would know that we talked a little bit about how we would greet on stage, and we talked about like a fake fist bump or a fist bump, and his hug then had Dr. King say, why don't we just hug? So, and I felt your hug.
Yeah, that's true.
And it meant a lot to me. When Jesus was asked, teacher, what's the greatest commandment, right? He said, well, first we have to love God, have a governor. Somebody calls us to our best, right? With all of our heart, all of our mind, and with all of our soul. And then the second is like it, he said, love your neighbor. And for all of us in the audience, there weren't any caveats, like love your neighbor if they're lovable. Love your neighbor if they vote the way you do, or if they are the same color of skin. He just basically said that we need to love our neighbors. Is love a choice?
Well, before I say whether it's a choice or not, I want to take it one step further, because Christ went on to say, I give you a new commandment, which to me overrides that old one. Not overrides it, but it transcends it, because we had no example. It's one thing for somebody to say, that's why I was telling you earlier, the example of my mother
Sure.
was more powerful. When the Old Testament had those same commandments, there was no example. Jesus became the example. So he's saying, do it like I did it. I showed you what love, unconditional agape love is. And so to me, it's a commandment for those of us that are in Christ. Yeah, we can reject those commandments. So to a certain extent, it's a choice to accept Jesus fully into your heart and to govern your life. And that's where the love comes from for me. So the choice is not the love.
The choice is about first Jesus and letting the governor then, because then he unleashes the love.
He unleashes, because the way that my father used to teach it when he talked about agape love, which is the foundation of his nonviolent philosophy and methodology, is that agape love is God's love flowing in and through the human heart.
So let's move to what's up today, right? The scripture tells us that a nation divided against itself, it's brought to desolation, that every house that's divided against itself cannot stand. So it feels like at this point there's division, not that it's new, but that there's division in our nation. And we created a creed last year at our organization. Let me try it out with you. Because when I was hearing the division in our program, we started saying to everyone, I am for everyone. I'm not for everything, but I'm still for everyone, because in my relationship with God, I know that he's for me. He's not for everything I've ever done or thought or said, but he's always for me. He's always for us. So I just thought, well, we should be for each other. And the world has now turned into, well, if you're not in agreement with me on everything, then I still can't be for you. What do you think about that?
You know, I think it's a true statement. As long as people know that when people have conditions that they are dealing with, we have to find a way, in spite of our perspective on those conditions, to try to understand. I think oftentimes we don't take the time in being for people to understand their journey, the struggle, the things.
Their story.
Their story, yeah.
Their story.
And I think part of the division in today's society is because there has been a lot of oppression. There's been a lot of discrimination.
I'll tell you, Dr. King, in the last 2 weeks, I did something that I've never done. I didn't ever feel like I needed to do it, but it was amazing. A childhood friend, Wyman Henderson, who I played ball with as a little boy, actually was the only white ball player on an all-black basketball team in Miami, Florida, yeah. And Wyman and I were great friends. We broke bread at our house, and I broke bread at his house, and we were 11, 12, 13, and just like the description you had earlier about kids playing, well, he lives in Atlanta now, and he's a great Christian man, and we talk all the time and love on each other all the time as Christian brothers. 2 weeks ago, for the first time, I asked him some of those questions. Help me understand what it's like to be a black man, Wyman. Because I want to understand, because, you know, I do a lot of things generously in the lives of everyone I come across because of who governs me. But his answer really was so helpful. And then yesterday, as it turns out, Rennie Curran, who played for the University of Georgia, who's an amazing Christian guy, Ty Anderson and I had lunch with Rennie, and I asked him the question. And it's not one of those things you normally are accustomed to asking, like, how does it feel to be a Black woman, right? Or what it's like to be. But I asked Rennie, and I'll tell you, I left those two conversations changed. I don't feel like I've done anything wrong. And I think a lot of times people just feel like, I haven't done anything wrong. But that's different than what else are you doing intentionally to do something right, to do something better, to help this nation get less divided. And I know for me, those two exchanges were so enlightening. And it was cool because it was safe. These are two men who love me, and I love them. We're Christian brothers, and we can just talk. And it was just beautiful. And I told Rennie, I said, you know, when a couple weeks from now, I'm going to have a big dinner with 25 of my white guy friends, and we're going to have the same conversation with all 25 of them, because I want you to be able to help us understand and to see through your eyes and your experiences. And there ain't no anger or bitterness in either Wyman or Rennie, just beautiful men who could then help me understand. And it changed the way I think in a very positive way. And sign me up.
So it's like the Good Samaritan. You know, I tell the story from this angle that, you know, the priest and the Levite were so consumed with their own world, and they saw off the peripheral the person on the side, but, you know, they were in their world, their silo, and kept moving.
Yep.
The Samaritan, and I use this notion, the Samaritan got up close and personal. And I talk about me being nearsighted. I have on contacts. If I take them off, literally, people that I know can walk in the door, and they have to come very close for me to make out who it is. I see, you know, images, unless I know somebody's walking, all that kind of stuff. I said, but when I put those glasses on, they pull it close to me and things become clear. Clarity happens, and I can see it for what it is. And that's what you're doing. You're getting up close and personal to get the clarity. Because I think the distance, my father said, men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. And that's why removing those barriers that existed in the South, those signs, Black here, white here, keeping people separated and divided, is why he had to work in that area to get those physical signs out of the way. Now we got to get the signs in our heart, because I say the signs have been removed, but now they're etched in our heart. So now we got to get those out of the way and get close and get personal and have these, you know, points of connection to gain greater insight, so that being for me now translates into the compassionate action to ensure that the things in our society that continue to bring harm and hurt to me and the people that look like me are changed and transformed.
So there's a lot of white, Black, brown people that I know that love. We just need to do a better job in listening to each other and talking to each other and asking each other. And then we need to do the things every single day, set the example like we talked about earlier, right? Be the reflection of the example so that others can get involved with the movement of making America less divided and more united, which is what we're all about. If your pops was, I know he's here with us right now. It's amazing and awesome to feel it. But if he was talking to us right now, would he suggest that since I have a dream speech that there's been progress?
I mean, nobody can doubt, and certainly he wouldn't, that we've made substantial progress, but we still have substantial ways to go. You know, there are things in our society today that are different from when even he was assassinated. There is, you know, he got a chance to see, you know, Blacks and whites come together in integrated audiences. For instance, here in Atlanta in 1965 in January, the city finally decided to honor him after winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And it was the first integrated dinner at a downtown hotel.
Wow.
And it was because of the leadership of and I always forget Woodruff's first name, who was a part of the Coca-Cola company, and really going behind the scenes with the corporate leaders say, this is the right thing to do, and if we don't, it's going to impact, who we are as a city.
Takes courage
Right.
to do that.
And it's the reason why Birmingham didn't come the economic engine of the South, because Atlanta, that's where they get this whole notion of the city's too busy to hate. Atlanta transcended that and said, no, we're going to put that aside. And so certainly, that kind of coming together, he got the witness. But I think, and the tremendous amount of political progress he did not get to see. The difference between now and back then, we weren't in the room. We weren't in the state houses. We weren't sitting on
We weren't the president of the United States.
Judges' benches.
Yeah.
We weren't president of the United States. We weren't on Capitol Hill. We weren't in the state capitals. Now there's a presence of African Americans there. So he would certainly applaud the political progress in that regard, in terms of the ability to elect people into office. But he was working very diligently on the area of economic injustice at the time of his assassination, when he called on the Poor People's Campaign. And I think he would still be troubled that the things he wrote to us in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos of Community, in that last chapter, The World House, where he talked about this being an interrelated world, that we literally live in this world house. And these are our brothers and sisters all over the world. Right. And he said, we must learn how to live together as brothers. And I had sisters, and he was brothers for us back then meant everybody. Right. Or we will be forced together we will be forced to perish as fools. And then he went on to talk about how we've made so much progress scientifically and technologically, how fast we can get to places, sure. That we couldn't sure. in the days of the horse and buggy and all of that. But now the airplanes can get us to another country this quick. The growth in technology. But he said our moral self lags. And so we've got to overcome that lag, so that as we advance technologically and scientifically, we don't destroy ourselves in the misuse of our own instruments. And he said, so it's going to require a revolution of values. Yeah. And he said, well, you put people at the center. So he said, we must rapidly become a people-centered society rather than a thing-centered society. And we must find a way to elevate our loyalties beyond our tribe, our race, and even our nation, to have an overriding loyalty to all of humanity. And so he was pushing us and saying, we have to do that, and we've got to look at that time, and I know this is a difficult conversation for people, but he said, we've got to find a way to redistribute wealth, a radical redistribution of wealth in the country. Because if there's not a balance, eventually, if it's too top heavy, I mean, I think the pandemic tried to reveal some things to us. I'm not sure we've grasped it yet. But we've got to find a way to make sure that there's full employment in this country, so that people can live up to their best. And that means we got to provide and make sure there are provisions made for people educationally, housing, all that kind of stuff. So he would still be challenging us on the economic front, that we've got to find a way to make sure that we are not so well off here in the United States of America, and yet over in this country, there's still people, not only do they not have clean drinking water, but they're not even empowered to ensure that they can sustain it. Yeah. So we got to move beyond just the mission of providing the water, but we got to teach people, how to fish, so to speak.
Our program is all personal, professional best. It's all about, there's where we are, and there's a better place where we can be in every part of our life. And that's what I just heard you say. We've made progress, but not fast enough and not enough. And so let's close with this. Give us one thing that all of us can do, just one thing that everyone that's watching today can do that can help make the cause and us get better. What is it we can do?
Well, I'm going to say it two separate ways. The first thing is we can do what Jesus said, be born again. we've got to change our mindsets because there's some things, unfortunately, as much as I love America, there's some things that have been faulty in the development of our country that we have to correct. We have a campaign now at the King Center called Be Love. And my father said, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. So there's some things that we have to correct in our country, and we have to do it in the spirit and in the heart of love. And in order to do that, the born againness, we got to kind of purge some of the ways in which we have been taught and developed. I hate to say that. And the reason I say that is, for instance, I always tell people the best place to start the journey to kind of helping America correct course on some things, if you can't physically go, I don't know if there's something online, but there's a place in Montgomery, Alabama where the movement started. And it's called the Peace and Justice Museum, from enslavement to mass incarceration. And it was founded by Brian Stevenson, the movie Just Mercy, many people may know about. And it really documents how this country was developed through white supremacy in our systems, and how slavery started and how that has been perpetuated. I don't think we're going to get better until we deal with the root of institutionalized racism in this country. We're always going to have people who hate people. We're always going to have people who discriminate against people. But we got to make sure that the structures and systems that we continue to create and that we continue to operate through don't have policies and practices that create injustice and inequity. And so it's going to take a lot of work to transform those. But in order to do it, we got to learn how we even got here.
We got to
stop.
In order
to know where you're going, you got to know how you got to that place where you are now.
Yeah. And it's going to start and finish with love, because love will,
that's what I said, love correcting everything.
Love will create the
love
roadmap.
Is the energy, it's the fuel, it's the force.
It's all of it, because it will hold us accountable to the standard that we need to be.
And as we work through some troubling spaces, I mean, my father challenged systems, but he loved the people as he challenged. That's why, and we teach in the philosophy of nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. So that's why certain things, when you see him, he is not trying to demoralize people, diminish people. He's not trying to win over them. He's trying to win them over.
The argument on social media, right? He did much better than that, much better than that, much more powerful.
Batter back and forth
I'll leave you with this. We have in our office in Alpharetta, on our wall, it's been on there for, since we moved into the building. Everyone can be great, because everyone can serve, right? And I think if we all replace the word serve, it's love, because service that's done well is really love. Love. Hey, thank you so much for being a part of Personal and Professional Best today, and God bless you. And I want to give you a big hug.